It started as a joke. At least, that's what they thought. Iron Spirit MMA was buzzing that afternoon. The gym in downtown Atlanta was holding its monthly open house. Families, students, trainers, and curious locals had packed the place. Kids kicked punching bags. Coaches barked orders. Parents sipped coffee and snapped pictures. It was loud, it was busy, and no one was paying much attention to the woman in the far corner of the room. Angela Reed, the janitor. She moved quietly, mop in hand, wiping away sweat and chalk like she had 100 times before. Mid-30s, lean but strong, with deep brown skin that caught the overhead lights, and curly hair tucked beneath a plain ball cap. Her hoodie was faded. Her shoes were worn. She looked like someone who kept to herself. Someone invisible. But Coach Blake Turner noticed her. Or rather, he chose her. He stood tall at the center of the mat, flashing that smug grin everyone at the gym had come to know. Former fighter, black belt, arrogant as hell. He raised his voice for all to hear. "Hey Angela," he called out, pointing. "Why don't you come out here and show us your fighting spirit? Maybe get him up a break, huh?" Laughter exploded from the crowd. Not polite laughter. Mean laughter. Mocking. Aimed at someone they assumed had no business stepping foot on that mat. Angela didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. She set the mop aside, calmly removed her hoodie, revealing a sculpted frame built from years of discipline and training, and walked to the center of the ring. She looked Coach Blake Turner in the eye and said only one sentence. "I accept, but you better not cry when you lose." The laughter stopped. The gym went quiet. What happened in the next 5 minutes would shake everyone in that room to their core and reveal a truth no one saw coming. Because Angela wasn't just a janitor. She was something far, far more dangerous. And this was the day the whole world would find out. Angela Reed had worked at Iron Spirit MMA for nearly 2 years. Most people barely noticed her, just the quiet janitor who cleaned up after others had finished sweating, sparring, and celebrating their personal victories. She didn't talk much. She didn't complain. She just showed up early, stayed late, and kept the place spotless. But what they didn't know, what no one ever asked, was who she had been before the mop, before the name tag, before the quiet life. Iron Spirit MMA wasn't just any gym. It was one of Atlanta's most elite martial arts centers. The walls were lined with championship photos, signed gloves, and glossy banners from past tournaments. Kids trained here after school. Adults came in after work to relieve stress, learn self-defense, or chase dreams of fighting glory. Blake Turner, the head coach, ran the gym like a boot camp, with loud commands, tough love, and a no-nonsense attitude. Blake himself was in his early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of physical presence that made people instinctively move aside when he walked by. He was a former semi-pro fighter who never quite made it big, but carried himself like a champion. He barked orders, he threw shade, and he had a habit of picking on people he thought didn't belong. Angela was one of those people. Every now and then, you make a passive-aggressive remark as she passed by. Careful not to slip on your own mop water. "Wha? Cleaning mats won't get you in shape, sweetheart." He thought he was being funny. No one laughed, but no one said anything either. Angela took it all in stride. Always calm, always quiet. But if you look closely, if you paid real attention, you notice something strange. Her movements. The way she lifted heavy equipment without strain. The way she carried herself, balanced, centered, aware of every footstep. The way her eyes scanned the room like a hawk watching everything at once. She didn't move like someone who was just there to clean. She moved like someone who had trained. Like someone who had once lived in a ring and hadn't yet forgotten what it felt like. But of course no one noticed. Until that day. The day everything changed. The day Coach Blake Turner made the worst mistake of his career. Challenging a woman whose silence held more power than any shout in the room. It wasn't the first time Blake Turner had singled Angela out. In fact, over the months, his remarks had become more pointed, more public. The kind of comments that didn't sound explicitly cruel, but dripped with disrespect, especially when you knew how to listen. Some folks just weren't built for combat, he'd say, nodding toward Angela while addressing a group of students. They're better off sweeping up after the real fighters. The students would chuckle awkwardly. Some would glance at Angela and quickly look away. No one ever said anything, Because in places like Iron Spirit, silence often sounded a lot like agreement. Angela never responded. She'd just keep cleaning, her expression unreadable. But every word sank a little deeper. Not because she was hurt. She'd heard worse, but because it reminded her of the world outside these walls. A world where people saw her skin, her job title, and her gender before they ever saw her strength. What made it worse was how casually it all happened. One afternoon, as she was wiping down the front windows, 2 new members came in, a man and his teenage daughter. The girl, about 16, looked nervous. Blake walked up to greet them, all charm and bravado. "This your first time here?" he asked with a smile. "Don't worry, we'll turn her into a fighter. Just make sure she doesn't end up like Angela over there." He pointed toward the glass, where Angela stood holding a rag in her hand, frozen mid-white. The father laughed. The girl didn't. Angela turned slowly and met Blake's eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. There was something in her stare, steady, unblinking, that made him shift his weight slightly, just for a moment. Then he scoffed and walked away. That was Blake's thing. He punched down, picked the easy targets, made himself look bigger by belittling others. And yet, he never once asked himself the most important question. What if he wasn't the strongest person in the room? What if the quietest woman he'd mocked had once trained harder, fought tougher, and risen higher than he ever did? But he wouldn't realize that. Not yet. Because men like Blake only understand one kind of truth. The kind you learn the hard way, when it knocks you flat on your back. The final straw didn't come with a shout. It came with a microphone. Every month, Iron Spirit MMA hosted what they called Demo Day, a kind of open house where students could invite friends, family, and potential new members. There'd be sparring matches, training exhibitions, and, of course, Coach Blake Turner running his mouth like he was hosting a pay-per-view event. That day, the gym was packed. The bleachers were full. Kids in crisp white GIs warmed up on the sidelines. Parents sipped coffee from to-go cups. Blake strutted across the mat with a mic in hand, soaking in the attention. "We got a special crowd today," he shouted, flashing his signature grin. "Bunch of new faces. Welcome to Iron Spirit, where we turn average folks into champions." People clapped. The energy was high. Blake loved it, and his tone shifted just a little. And speaking of average, he paused, scanning a room. His eyes landed on Angela, kneeling in the corner near the supply closet, changing a trash bag. Some people are just born in mop mats. And hey, we need those people too, right? Laughter erupted. Not nervous laughter. Not confused. Real laughter. The kind that stings. Angela didn't flinch. She stood up, tied the bag, and calmly walked toward the back hallway. Blake chuckled into the mic. "Don't take it personal, Angela. Just having a little fun." But it wasn't fun. Not to the few who saw it for what it was. A young boy named Marcus, one of the only black students in the advanced class, sat in the front row with his mom. He leaned over and whispered, "Why is he always like that to her?" His mom didn't answer. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes locked on Angela as she disappeared for the back door. The moment passed quickly. Blake went on with the show, throwing kicks, calling students to the mat, pretending nothing had happened. But something had, because behind that back door, in a tiny break room with flickering fluorescent lights, Angela Reed stared at her reflection in the vending machine's glass. And she made a decision, not to fight back out of pride, but to finally remind this place, and everyone in it, who she used to be, and who she still was. Angela didn't say a word for the rest of that afternoon. She finished her shift in silence, moving from corner to corner, sweeping, wiping down surfaces, emptying bins, same as always. But something had changed. Not in her hands, not her steps, but in her presence. She wasn't just moving, she was calculating. That night, long after the crowd had gone home and the lights had dimmed, Blake stayed behind, running drills with a few of his senior students. His voice echoed through the gym like a hammer on steel. Loud, sharp, unrelenting. Then Angela stepped out from shadows. She wore no gym clothes, no gloves, no gear. Just the same old gray hoodie and sweatpants she always worked in. But something about the way she stood, shoulders back, chin raised, made the whole room pause. Even Blake blinked. "Need something, Angela?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice dipped in that same mocking tone. "Yes," she said calmly. "I want to take you up on your offer." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Offer?" She stepped closer. "You wanted me to step on the mat. You wanted to show the crowd the difference between a real fighter and someone who mops mats for a living. Let's do it." His students chuckled. Blake looked at her, half amused. "You're serious?" Angela nodded. "Dead serious. But with one condition." "Oh, I love conditions. Lay it on me." "If you win," she said, her voice steady, "I'll walk away. I'll resign from this job tonight. No excuses. No complaints." Blake grinned wide. "And if you win?" She stared straight into his eyes. "You stand right here, in front of your students, in front of every parent and every staff member, and you apologize. Not just to me, but to every kid you've ever looked down on. Every student of color you've treated like they didn't belong." The room fell dead quiet. One of the students dropped a jump rope. Blake's grin faltered just a bit, then returned. "You're on," he said, smirking. "Tomorrow. Kneel. I'll even give you the good gloves." Angela didn't smile. She turned, walked out of the gym without another word. Because for her, this wasn't about gloves. This was about dignity. And Blake Turner had just bet his reputation against the wrong woman. The next day, just before noon, Iron Spirit MMA buzzed with electricity. Word had spread fast. The janitor was fighting the head coach. Most thought it was a joke, some kind of promotional stunt. But curiosity had filled the gym wall to wall. Parents who had never stayed past drop-off now leaned against the railings. Students skipped drills to find a good view. Even a few local gym owners popped in, sensing something unusual. Blake was already warming up in a ring, stretching his arms, cracking his neck. He wore his pristine black GI, built tied with military precision, his confidence bleeding into every move. Angela entered the room quietly. No fanfare, no music, just her. Same gray hoodie, same sweatpants, hair pulled back tight. But the moment she stepped onto the mat, a hush fell. Even the kids stopped talking. Something about the way she moved, measured, controlled, told everyone watching this wasn't going to be what they expected. Blake smirked and motioned her forward. "Ready, janitor?" Angela said nothing. She simply pulled her hoodie over her head, revealing a fitted black tank top that showed the toned shoulders and defined core of someone who didn't just work out, but lived in her body like a weapon. The bell rang. Blake came in fast, testing her with a quick jab. Angela didn't flinch. She leaned back, just enough to let the glove pass inches from her cheek. Another jab. She sidestepped like a breeze, slipping between cracks. The crowd murmured. Some clapped. Most watched in stunned silence. Blake increased pressure, throwing in a low kick, then a faint punch to the gut. Angela didn't counter. She didn't panic. She danced. Calm, fluid, precise. Every movement was minimal but exact, like she had already read his playbook and was simply waiting for him to burn through it. Blake's face started to change. The grin faded. His breath came harder. The rhythm that made him feared in sparring matches was unraveling, thread by thread. Angela hadn't landed a single strike. And yet, she was winning. Control, respect, space, momentum, all without lifting a hand. The gym, once rowdy with anticipation, now stood still. Because they weren't watching a janitor anymore. They were watching a master at work. And Blake? He was starting to feel it. The slow, creeping realization that he might have just stepped into the ring with someone far out of his league. By the third minute, Blake Turner was sweating. Hard. Not just from a physical strain, but from the unfamiliar, creeping panic that had begun to claw at his confidence. Angela hadn't thrown a single punch. Not one. And yet, she was dismantling him. Each step she took, each subtle sway of her hips, each pivot of her feet, pulled him deeper into frustration. It was like fighting a shadow, one that anticipated every move a second too early. The harder Blake pressed, the more foolish he looked. And everyone could see it. The crowd, once buzzing with excitement, had grown eerily quiet. Some leaned in with widened eyes. Others exchanged glances, mouths slightly open. A few students had stopped breathing altogether. Angela's face remained unreadable. Focused, calm, dangerous. Then Blake snapped. He roared, not from power but from pride, from a humiliation building inside, like a pressure cooker. He wound up for his signature spinning back kick, the one that had dropped men twice her size in half the time. He launched into the air. It was fast, canvassy, flawless in form, but Angela saw it coming. She always had. She shifted her weight on her back foot, dipped under the arc of his leg like water, slipping beneath a bridge, and in a single breath, moved forward. Her counter was so smooth, so fast, some people didn't even see it happen. One perfectly timed step in, one quick twist to the hips, one palm strike, open hand, right to Blake's chest. It didn't look violent, it didn't sound dramatic, but it hit like a hammer. The air whooshed from Blake's lungs. His body folded midair, and before anyone could process what they had just witnessed, he hit the mat. Hard, flat on his back. Silence. A kind of silence that rang louder than any cheer. Blake lay still, blinking up at the fluorescent lights, trying to understand what had just happened. Angela stepped back, lowered her hand, and didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Every single person in that gym had just learned the same lesson. Power isn't always loud, and the strongest strike is the one you never saw coming. As Blake Turner lay stunned on the mat, gasping for air and swallowing the bitter taste of humiliation, the entire gym stood frozen. All eyes locked on the woman in the center of the ring, Angela Reed. But this wasn't the first time she'd stood in that kind of spotlight. Far from it. Years ago, under brighter lights and deafening crowds, she had a different name. Angela the Lioness Reed. A Muay Thai sensation out of Savannah, Georgia, undefeated for 3 years. Her fights weren't just wins. They were symphonies of precision, timing, and grace. Angela didn't fight with brute force. She broke opponents down piece by piece, dismantling their confidence before their bodies even touched the mat. Commentators used to say she fought like a chess master, always 2 moves ahead. The sports magazines called her the Quiet Hurricane. Fans lined up at 4 a.m. just to get a glimpse of her training. Little girls copied her warm-ups in front of mirrors. Grown men studied her footwork like gospel. She was on her way to becoming a global name. Until one night, everything changed. It was the eve of her biggest fight, an international title bout in Miami. Her 6-year-old son, Carter, had begged to come watch her compete. But Angela wanted him safe at home, away from the chaos of fight night. Carter snuck out anyway, climbing into a friend's car to surprise her. They never made it. A drunk driver ran a red light. The accident left Carter in critical condition for days. Angela never stepped into that ring. Instead, she rushed from the arena to the hospital in her fight gear, blood still smeared on her gloves from pre-fight warm-ups. Carter survived, but barely. And Angela? She never fought again. She vanished from the headlines. No interviews. No press releases. No farewell tour. She disappeared, retreating into a life no one questioned, a job no one noticed. Until today. And now, as people in the crowd began whispering, searching her name on their phones, pulling up old fight videos, they began to understand. She wasn't a mystery. She was a legend in plain sight. And for the first time in years, Angela wasn't hiding from her past. She was owning it, one breath, one strike, and one silent step at a time. The applause started slow. First, a few claps from the back row. Then, one by one, more hands joined. Within seconds, the gym erupted. Not in chaos, but in reverence. It wasn't the kind of cheer reserved for showy knockouts or flashy wins. This was something deeper, a kind of collective awakening. People weren't just applauding the victory, they were honoring the truth. Angela Reed, the janitor they'd overlooked, underestimated, laughed at, had just shown them all who she truly was. Not just a fighter, not just a former champion, but a woman who never needed the lights to prove her worth. Blake Turner finally pulled himself upright. His pride was bruised far worse than his body. For the first time in a long time, he looked small, pendant. Angela walked toward him, calm as ever. She didn't gloat. She didn't grin. She offered him her hand. Blake hesitated, then took it. The crowd went quiet. And then, something even more unexpected happened. The gym owner, Mr. Delgado, stepped forward. "Angela," he said into the mic, his voice thick with emotion, "I had no idea. We all didn't. But I can tell you this, you've just taught us more in one round than most learn in years. He looked around. If you're willing, we'd be honored to have you as part of our coaching staff. Full-time, you've earned that 100 times over. A few people clapped. Some even nodded in anticipation. But Angela? She just shook her head gently. Thank you, she said, voice steady. But I'm not here for that. Mr. Delgado blinked. Then what do you want? Angela looked across the gym to the students, the kids of color, the quiet ones hiding in the back of class, unsure if they belonged. I just want people like them, she nodded toward a young boy in the corner, to know that they don't have to shout to be strong. That respect isn't something you wait for. It's something you demand by how you carry yourself. She turned to Blake. And I want people like him to think twice before deciding who's worth listening to and who isn't. The room stood in stillness. Angela picked up her hoodie, draped it over her shoulder, and stepped off the mat. Not because she was walking away from the moment, but because she had already won something far greater than a fight. She had reclaimed her voice without ever raising it. The ripple effect didn't take long. By the next training session, something had shifted inside Iron Spirit MMA. You could feel it in the way students walked in, not louder, but taller. You could see it in the eyes of those who had always hung back, afraid to make mistakes, afraid to be noticed. Especially the kids who had learned to keep their heads down because they didn't quite fit the mold. One of them was Marcus. He was 13, lanky, and quiet, one of the few black kids in the advanced Muay Thai class. For months, he'd struggled with confidence, told to try harder, focus more, and quit being soft. He never pushed back, never raised his voice, but he felt every word. That Monday, he arrived early. He was the first one on the mat. When Blake entered the gym, his energy was different. He greeted each student with sincerity, not the usual bark. When he reached Marcus, he paused, then said, "You ready to lead warm-ups today?" Marcus blinked. "You mean me?" Blake nodded. "I mean you." And Marcus did. He called out stretches. He led drills. And for the first time since joining the gym, he didn't feel like a shadow on the edge of someone else's spotlight. Angela wasn't there that day. She didn't need to be. Her presence lingered in the way students looked at each other, with a little more respect. In the way the instructors watched, listened, and corrected, with more patience, more understanding. Even some of the parents noticed. One mom, who had previously brushed off her daughter's concerns about not being taken seriously, approached Mr. Delgado. "I think my girl needs to hear more stories like Angela's," she said quietly. "Maybe all of our kids do." Word got around that Blake had started attending coaching seminars, real ones focused on inclusive teaching and emotional awareness. He didn't announce it. He didn't post about it. He just did it. Something in him had changed. The culture of the gym began to shift. Not overnight, but inch by inch. The silent weight some students had carried, the fear of being underestimated, misunderstood, ignored, started to lift. And while Angela had no intention of being anyone's mentor, her example became the new standard. A quiet storm that had passed through just long enough to clear the air for everyone else. Angela Reed never asked for recognition. She never posted about the match, never gave interviews, never mentioned what she'd done, what she'd reclaimed. But the gym remembered. Word traveled beyond the walls of Iron Spirit MMA, not through viral videos or social media posts, but through people, quiet conversations in locker rooms, whispers between coaches, stories shared by parents over dinner tables. "She didn't even hit him hard," someone would say. "No, that's what made it so powerful," someone else would answer. Back at the gym, Angela continued her job as if nothing had changed. She still came in early, still wore the same gray hoodie, still pushed her mop across the mats each evening with the same rhythm. But now, people greeted her with something different. Respect. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, but the kind that lingers in the way someone moves aside when you pass. The way they meet your eyes and nod, without needing to say a word. Kids who once barely noticed her presence now lit up when they saw her. Some of the younger ones would sneak glances at her arms, whispering to each other like they were in the presence of a superhero. One little girl even drew a crayon picture of Angela standing on a mat, cape and all, with the words, "Strong like her." Someone made t-shirts, black with gold letters. The lioness swept through. Angela never wore one herself, but she smiled when she saw a group of teenagers wearing them during warm-ups. The movement wasn't about glory. It was about a reminder of what strength really looks like. Coach Blake, for his part, kept his word. He apologized, openly, clearly, and without excuse. More importantly, he changed. He started watching, listening, learning, and when new members asked about the quiet woman cleaning the back of the room, he no longer ignored the question. He told a story. He told it simply. "That's Angela," he'd say, "and if you're lucky, maybe one day you'll move the way she does." Angela didn't need spotlights. She didn't need titles anymore. She had become something more lasting. Not just a fighter, not just a name, but a legend. A living reminder that real power doesn't demand attention, it commands respect. And when the story of Iron Spirit MMA was told years later, it always began the same way. Let me tell you what happened. The day the janitor stepped into the ring. The story of Angela Reed isn't just about a fight. It's about something bigger, something deeper. It's about how easy it is to misjudge people, to assume someone's worth based on their job title, their silence, or the clothes they wear. It's about how often society overlooks those who move quietly, work humbly, and carry themselves without the need for attention. Angela never raised her voice. She never demanded respect. She earned it, not through force, but through composure. Not through speeches, but through example. And what happened that day in the gym? It wasn't just a one-time moment of justice. It was a mirror held up to every single person in that room, and to us as viewers and listeners. How many times have we ignored someone because they didn't look impressive? How many times have we laughed along, stayed silent, or looked the other way while someone else was being dismissed or disrespected? Angela's story reminds us of something powerful. Strength is not volume. Strength is not a belt. Strength is not status. Real strength is how you carry yourself when no one's watching. Real strength is how you treat others, especially those with less power, less recognition, or less privilege. And sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one barking commands. It's the one cleaning up afterward, watching, listening, waiting. So here's our challenge to you. Next time you meet someone, at work, at school, at the gym, pause for a second. Look past the surface. Ask yourself, what story don't I see? What strength am I overlooking? Because somewhere out there, there's another Angela. Another legend in disguise. Another janitor who could outmaneuver a champion if only given the chance. If the story moved you, do one thing right now. Leave a comment. Have you ever misjudged someone or been misjudged yourself? Tell us. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Hit the like button if you believe that strength can come from anywhere. Share this video to remind others not to underestimate anyone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that challenge the way we think, subscribe to this channel. Because the quietest voices, they often carry the loudest truths. And the strongest people, they rarely have to prove it until the moment they do.